Yeah. Well, why don't we get started? Thank you all so much for being here. We're really excited to have this program, and like I've said before, Passover is my favorite Jewish holiday. I know it's really special for all of us, and this time of the year is just a special time of the year. And I am really determined to make this year even more meaningful than it could be. I think, as we saw in the download yesterday, even that Passover experience to me just felt like even more meaningful. So I'm hoping we can figure out how to do that this year, and that's what we're here for. So I'll pass it off to Rabbi Lana to kick us off.
Thanks so much, and thanks everyone for coming. As I mentioned yesterday, the first question that's asked in the Passover Seder is, why is this night different from all other nights? And this year, it will be very different from all other nights because it'll be the first time in our lives that we're having Passover during a plague, during a global pandemic. That has real ramifications, both in terms of how Passover takes place, as well as what it means to us. So it has real ramifications in terms of how it takes place. I'll give you an example. I have my Seder plate here. I was given this for my wedding 19 years ago, and it has been in my garage for the last 19 years because I'm always invited to my folks and my in-laws, so I've never had to use the Seder plate. But this year I'll be using it for the first time because, you know, we'll be doing Seder by Zoom, which is entirely new. I would normally never touch a computer on Passover, but this will be our first time doing that. I know many people will be leading Seder for the first time, and I'm hoping that today, if any of you are in that situation, that today will be helpful to you in terms of how to do that. So it has real ramifications in terms of what Passover is going to look like for us, but also really what it means. I think that this is an opportunity, even though we're more alone, we're going to be in smaller groups and we're going to be more alone, and some people will be literally alone. The only person, you know, if they live alone, they will be alone for Seder, some people. So, you know, even though we are alone, I have the sense that we are alone together, that the entire world, much of the world is in the same situation, and that may be an opportunity for us to think about what are Passover customs from different parts of the world and to incorporate them into our Seder. Even if you're not from that part of the world, you could still incorporate different traditions, and I'll share with you a few as we go through. And also, I think we have a real sense of what freedom means, because a lot of our freedoms have been taken away, things that we took for granted a few weeks ago that were just normal parts of our lives are now beyond our reach. And so it's really an opportunity to reflect on what is freedom and what does it mean to us, and what freedoms do we still have, and how can we make this a moment. The Israelites, when they were in the time of the plagues, they turned it into a moment to achieve greater freedom and greater social justice and to move from slavery to freedom. So how can we too move from slavery to freedom to work towards greater freedom in our community and in our world at this moment of the plague? So I'm going to share with you a few moments that I think could be an opportunity along the way. I'll go through some of the steps of the Seder and just share with you a couple ideas for a few minutes, and then we'll be opening that up to another part. But the Seder begins, as you saw yesterday, with Kiddush, with wine, with sanctifying the moment. I think that's an idea of trying to have joy, even in tough times, that we try to have that sense of joy, and we begin with joy. So it could be an opportunity to talk about or think about what are the sources of joy for you still in this time. So that's the first step. It's also worth noting that several of the steps of the Passover Seder involve washing your hands. That's 2 of the steps. And we often really neglect that. We skip it, or somebody does it, it's real quick. but really that means something to us this year in a way that it never meant something before. A number of weeks ago in the Torah reading, I was like stunned when I heard it. The phrase said, "V'rachatzu yadehem v'lo yamutu." They shall wash their hands and they will not die. And I just had this sense of like, that's our game plan, team. We're washing our hands so that we don't die. And I think that so those two steps can be understood in a much more powerful way than ever before. Then you have the step of the dipping the green vegetable into the salt water, the karpas. So that's the step of the idea that renewal comes to each of us, that we're so
I'm
happy
a little trouble
that
hearing you.
springtime is coming. Oh, okay. We're happy that springtime is coming, but yeah, it's a challenging time. What? Can you hear me?
I hear you now, but for me, your screen is frozen.
Can you close the door?
It might be if you turn off your, am I muted? No, if you turn off your video.
Okay, that I don't know how to fix.
Here.
Oh, we're good. I think it's back.
We're good?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So then you have the breaking of the matzah. I want to say something about matzah that my dad always says, is that if you want to halfway between a challah, imagine hugging a challah, and then imagine hugging a piece of matzah, right? If you try to hug a piece of matzah, it's going to break all over, symbolizes the challenge of having to leave a new place and leave into a new place and take the minimum of what you need and move forward. Symbolizes that the freedom is a hug, and we now can't hug many of the people that we love. So we have that contrast as well for us between the challah and the matzah. And so the matzah takes on a new meaning for us. At the beginning of the story, then we tell the story of Passover, and at the beginning of it, it has the halach ma'anya. It says, this year we are enslaved, next year may we be free. And that's an opportunity to talk about, what do you want to do when this is all over? You know, share what is freedom to you, what are you missing? What would you like to happen when this is all over? And what does freedom mean to you that you didn't realize you had before? There's also a Moroccan tradition where you actually take the Seder plate and you put it over your head and the head of anyone else, and you sing a song. You can look it up. You can Google Moroccan Passover tradition and it'll come up. So you could incorporate that. The idea is that you're giving a blessing to anyone who is with you, the blessing. So that's also a nice tradition that you can include in the idea of incorporating world traditions. As I mentioned yesterday in the plagues, I think the idea you have a cup of wine, you remove either with your finger or with a spoon, 1 drop of wine for each plague. And the idea is that we're showing compassion. Cup is full. We're showing who we're concerned. As you say in the Seder, you can mention whoever you're concerned about at this time and want to send some compassion to, whether that's those who are sick or those who are medical workers or anyone who's helping us time, that you can do the plagues that way, as you saw that I did yesterday. Dayenu, the song, that's a moment of gratitude. So you can have people share what are they grateful for, even in this difficult time. And there's, of course, some beat each other with them, which acts out the story, and that's while singing Dayenu. So that's also a lovely tradition that you can do. And then the opening for the beautiful piece journaled by Rabbi, what is it when your only guest for Passover is Elijah? There's the idea that Elijah comes to all of the homes as a symbol of redemption, figuratively. And you open the door for Elijah, we can think about those who are, that's the only person they're inviting this year, that they need to be alone. So we can, as we open the door to Elijah, think about all of them and send them our love, and hope that next year that won't be their only guest. So I think that moment can be understood in a new way. And the Seder concludes with next year in Jerusalem. And this is the only year in my lifetime that that's not an option, that you can't go to Jerusalem at this time. For thousands of years, the Jewish people did not have that option, but in our lifetime, we have. So what does it mean to say next year in Jerusalem, you know, really hoping that next year that's an option for us again? And what, you know, also what other freedoms are we hoping to be in a place next year? And what do we hope to have learned from this time where our freedom has been taken away? What do we hope to have learned from this moment that we can take to our next year, hoping that we're in a better place? How do we hope to have improved ourselves, our community, in this time of challenge? I also want to share, there was a beautiful piece by Rabbi Susan Fendrick, and she said it's called, you can have a shvach Seder. Shvach in Judaism means, in Yiddish, means not so fancy, like not so fantastic. And it's a beautiful piece. I don't want to read the whole thing, but the idea is like, you're in the middle of a pandemic. You don't have to cook 7 dishes. You don't have to, your Seder does not have to look like it did last year. You're allowed to be tired. You're allowed to be upset. You know, do what you can and go to sleep feeling, you know, feeling dayenu, feeling like you've done enough. And I think that we need to keep that in mind. It's not going to be, you know, do what you can, but it's not going to be this fancy Zoom PowerPoint presentation. Just do what you can and know that it's enough. And also to remember that, you know, this Seder is probably the hardest of my lifetime. I think I can kind of safely say that for the group here. But there have been Seders in the Warsaw Ghetto. There have been Seders at Auschwitz. There have been far worse times than where we are right now. And even in this time, there is so much that Dayenu, that we are grateful for. So those are some opening ideas of how you can understand or reimagine Passover. Also the 4 questions, which I skipped, you know, what are the things you're asking about? What are the things that you're wondering about? So my understanding is that we're now going to explore 4 questions in a certain way. So I'll turn it over to Lila to.
Thank you so much for the intro. Really beautiful. So we're about to, in a second, go on to small discussion groups to shake it up. Rabbi Lana and I have crafted our own 4 questions that we ask every year during the Seder. We ask 4 questions in an attempt to explain why this night is different from all other nights, why it stands apart from other Jewish holidays, and why we can make it special. So we've created our own 4 questions to help us think about this very different Passover, but how we can still make it really special, and also to reflect on the themes of Passover and how it's relating to our lives now. But before I post the questions in the chat, I want to give everyone the opportunity to share how you're planning to celebrate Passover this year, or this springtime. So please put in the chat what your plans are for Passover, and I'll have a few people talk about how they're feeling about it, if they're excited, if they're nervous. Just want to hear what you're doing, how you're making it work. Amy's doing a Zoom Passover with her family. Have you guys picked a Haggadah? Like, is there a structure? Orly Zoom with the in-laws, cooking and bringing them food, nice. Zoom Seder, able to join family, Skyping a best friend who isn't Jewish and interested. Mailing out our usual Haggadot and sing booklets to family, then doing a Zoom Seder together, really nice. Zoom with family, using FaceTime or part of the Seder to bring in my grandpa, probably for the singing part. Nice. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to now put in the 4 questions we've come up with, and we'll break out into 4 groups. And each person on our team is with a group in case you forget the question, but also when we come back together, want to have one person from each group share what they talked about, and then we can have a larger group discussion when we come back. So here are the 4 questions here. So group 1, what is your favorite Passover or springtime tradition? How can you adapt this tradition to still practice it this year? Group 2, what are your 4 questions? What are the biggest questions you're asking about yourself, your community, and the world? Group 3, what are you feeling enslaved to today? How so? Group 4, what is freedom to you, and how can we move towards that freedom? So I'm about to open the breakout groups. Some will be there to remind you the question if you forget, and I hope these are great conversations, and we'll come back and share. All right, see you all soon.
I can't hear you, Lila.
Thank you. Awesome. I think we're all back. Awesome. Cool. So group 1, someone want to share what you guys talked about?
Well, I'm talking enough, so it should be Ariela.
Oh, Ariela's on mute. I mean, Ariela's on mute right now. There we go.
I forgot if I was group 1 or not. I forgot which number.
Yeah, that's our group.
Yeah. So our question was, what kinds of traditions do you typically have during Passover or during springtime, and like how can we like try to incorporate some of those traditions this year? So yeah, all of it. I mean, I really liked what Rabbi Lana and what Orly shared, but I won't speak for them. Also, like each person shared their own traditions, but I mean, I shared with me that like my family typically for the Seder, like for us, it's different this year. Typically we have like all kinds of like extended family and my grandpa and like participating in the Seder, like relatives like fly in for it. It's like kind of the big one that we do really big. And for something that my mom always asks is, instead of bringing like a food item, like to come with like a thought or an idea or something that could be discussed at some point throughout the Seder. So we are still gonna try to do that this year, and at least for like all of the like people that typically come to my family Seder, to at least for like 15 minutes get on Zoom together. We probably won't do like the whole thing together with all of the different people who normally come, but to at least have people share some Passover musings or like something that they might be feeling this year and what they're bringing with them into their Passover celebration.
Anyone else from that group want to share?
I was just talking about what did I say? Well, I was talking about just traditions, how difficult it is in the sense of, because my traditions with my family, what I grew up, were very important to me living in Israel, and my grandpa, doing a Seder. And then once I married my husband, which we've been married for 20 years, so I've had to change the traditions and create new ones. So for me, Passover is actually a tough holiday for me because as much as I want to do the new tradition, I still think of the stuff that I did with my grandpa, who passed away, unfortunately. But, you know, I still think of those traditions. So it's just creating new traditions, and this year thinking of something else that we can bring to the table. Yeah, that was one thing I shared.
Great. Group 2, want to share your question and what you talked about?
Yes. So our question, and I don't remember the exact wording, but it was the one about what are new questions that we're asking during this time, basically. And so we talked about kind of like the first question that came to each of our minds was like all obviously related because everything is Corona, but slightly different. So for me, my first question was just like, how will things look when this is all over? And like, how will they look different? How will they look the same as what we remember the world as being? And then Melissa said, well, my question is like, will this end? Like, will there be an end? Is it going to end? It's hard to, with all the uncertainty, see where that is and how we're going to get there. And then Amy shared what, you know, from this time, what will we hold on to temporarily? And then what will we hold on to more long-term? And that got us into, I think, a really nice conversation about how there is a lot, it's hard right now, like every conversation we have turns to COVID, turns to that, but we talked about how there's so much, you know, there's this like community feeling about it. And so they spoke a bit about like what it, you know, having lived through like 9/11 and like what the community felt like and how long did that last or what changed from that in the way that we were one community. And I talked a bit about the feeling of like living in Israel during war and how I knew every day that when I got on a bus, everyone has been reading the same news I have and how I've been having that feeling here, which is weird because while I was living in Israel, the thing for me was like, this would never happen in the States. I would never live in LA and feel like everyone is on the same page. And so it's interesting now to have that feeling with Corona here. And then, and we talked about how just like there's a lot of cool, creative, wonderful things coming out of this that we're interested to see how that changes things, but also that we're wondering what basically another question I guess is, which we didn't pose as a question, but I will, is like, what conversation topics are there at this point that will keep us from turning to COVID in every single conversation that we have? But I think I got everything. Amy, Melissa, let me know if I miss anything. They're both nodding thumbs up, so I think we're good. And thanks, yeah.
Thanks so much. Group 3. Mara, I think you're muted. There we go.
There we go. So our question was, what do you feel enslaved to and how so? And we talked about how we were feeling enslaved to kind of how we present ourselves, you know, like beauty standards and just the things that we see online and on social media, that it's like how we're supposed to be as opposed to how we actually are. So for some of us, that would mean like we put on makeup every day. For some of us, it means like we're scared to put on makeup because we don't want to do a bad job. And so now that we're stuck inside and we're kind of, you know, not seeing society, it's easier for us to be who we are, and we're less bound by those standards. And then another thing that we discussed was how some of us have a lot of choice in our lives, and we can really control and create the life that we want. And so maybe we don't feel bound or enslaved to anything because we have a lot of autonomy.
Awesome. Thanks. Group 4.
All right, I'll chime in. Brian and I talked a lot about freedom. Our question was, what does it mean to you, and how can we move towards that freedom? The first thing that we talked about, I actually thought at first that like freedom means that you are not bound by anything, whether it be physical or spiritual, you know, like actual. But then Brian actually threw in this idea that like we are free from having to not do something or be bound by something. And so I thought that was interesting. Like the idea that like, you know, we live in a democracy and we don't have someone, you know, knocking at our door at 3 a.m. Telling us that we need to do something. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's true. That's a really good point. And we also talked a lot about how having an awareness, like being self-aware, is very directly related to freedom and the privilege that comes with that awareness. You know, right now, I think we're very much focused on like the freedoms that we wouldn't typically have just because we are, you know, bound by our homes right now. But yeah, what else did we talk about? I feel like we had a really great conversation, and did I miss anything?
No, we're talking also about how, like, you know, if you trying to look at the situation through gratitude.
Oh, that's
when you look at something, you know, how when you look at something, you know, through your, you know, your gratitude goggles, essentially, you'll pick up these little things. Like I was saying, like, you know, you'll notice how free you actually are. Like I was noticing this really great. I did this, you know, I got to talk to my grandma the other day. It was like the coolest, and like I love like being able to like have, you know, like Skype with her. And I'm just like and being able to do that, because many people don't have their grandparents, and many people, you know, like, you know, I like just in like the same way, like I have the freedom to, you know, talk to my grandma. I also have the freedom from, you know, missing her, like I do my grandfather, who isn't with us anymore. But the thing is, you know, I might not have looked at it through those optics had I not, you know, had I not tried to be grateful, because, you know, once you know, especially right now, it's so heavy, and it's so, everything feels like, you know, it's very, you know, much like Leah was saying, all you do is talk about COVID, and like it's so in everyone's minds that it's it's only like, that's kind of like the one tone we're hearing. And so I found that, you know, when I'm trying to be grateful, that allows me to kind of widen my scope and see all the freedoms that I still do enjoy.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for sharing. I hope you enjoyed the breakouts. It's just nice to switch it up and have more intimate conversations on our daily Zoom calls. I shared this with a few of the groups, but I found it really interesting that for me at my Seders, these similar questions of what are we bound to, and how do we want to be free, and how can we get there, it always comes up as a discussion question. And everyone can always talks about just the bad things going on in their lives right now and how you can be freed from that. And so much of the discussion that came from today was all the ways that we're grateful for what we do have. And I think that is going to be how this year will be really different, which I think is really beautiful. Instead of focusing on the things we're bound to and how we can be freed, thinking about how we are free and how much we do have. So I think that's really beautiful. Thank you all for sharing. One of our last little activities we wanted to do is turn it back to Rabbi Alana, and if anyone has any questions, it's going to be sort of a Q&A now. Any questions on things they're thinking about for participating in a Seder or leading a Seder, or making this time special for you? Any other questions, or similar to that 4 questions question, just more things you're thinking about and relating to this time, and we can do a Q&A and talk through those. So just post in the chat box whenever you think of something.
you want me to read the questions and then?
Sure.
Okay. So has anyone found a short Haggadah that will work for a Zoom call? Well, one suggestion I have is that I did send out yesterday the PowerPoint of the Seder that we did yesterday, which you can share your screen in a Zoom call, so you don't actually need a book on paper. You could use that PowerPoint or throw something else in it if you want, so that you don't have to all have the same book. So if you're on Zoom, that's another way of going about it. The Maxwell House Haggadah is rather short, but any Haggadah that you're using, feel free to skip things, and adjust it accordingly. Actually, I remember when I went to my uncle's Seder. In my family Seder, they read every single paragraph, which even when the book is intending to give you a choice of paragraphs, my dad reads every single paragraph. But in my uncle's Seder, they had this part where they said, "We've now come to the splitting of the Red Sea. We now turn from page 5 to page 35. And I was like, whoa, I'm not in Kansas anymore. But any Seder, any Haggadah that you use, you can adapt. And I think especially this year, you shouldn't feel like you have to read every part of it. It's better to have discussions about what freedom means to you, what questions you have, what stories you've been through, than to feel bound by having to read every part of it. So that's an idea.
Ariela said, we talked a little bit about it in our group, but how do we include someone virtually who is much older and may have difficulty using the technology?
Yeah. Well, one option, depending on where that person is located, you could actually have them, if they have one, put the laptop outside the door and you wipe it down and you install whatever you need to on it and you wipe it down and you give it back to them, so that it becomes just simpler for them to just press on, and you can walk them through it to the degree that you can. Those who work with me know technology is not my strong suit, so that may be more of a question for IT, but that's an option.
Do we have any suggestions for Zoom Seders with someone on the other side of the country?
Mm-hmm. I think that they're similar, to the time zone you have to account for, but similar to doing a Zoom call with someone here. I think that the Seder we had yesterday can also be a model, both in terms of the PowerPoint, but also some of the things like the plagues, of how to do that. That's what comes to mind. Oddly enough, if the person's in the valley or if they're, further away, it's similar in terms of, other than adjusting for the time zone.
Yeah, I was on a webinar. Ariela and I actually were on a really great webinar, and I'm trying to get that recording to send it out to people, about how to lead a virtual Seder. And Mara, one of the really great points that I think they had was having a lead at each location, in each household. So having one person in whatever households in a different time zone, and for you to be on the same page with them. So picking a time together that works for everyone, and then once the Seder structure has been created, making sure not like having 20 people all in the loop, but having one person from each household in the loop to help make things go smoothly. It was a really great webinar, so I'm trying to get a recording of it to share out to everyone.
Another thing they said on that webinar about like time differences was that like Some households might have like kids who go to bed earlier, and that obviously complicates things even further with a time difference. But, you know, there was also like a rabbi on that call who pointed out, like, there's not going to be a police. Like, yes, it means to do, typically we're supposed to be doing things in a certain order, but like under the circumstances, if you have to like, you know, if you have to do certain things out of order so that like the kids can participate or the people on like the later time zone can participate at the same time, like they were saying that under the circumstance, it might be okay to like switch the order of certain things.
And I see on the side that says, is there a midnight deadline? No, there is not. You know, they, in the Haggadah, it says, you know, and the more you talk about it, the better it is. And some did it all the way till morning. So no, there's not a deadline. And, you know, I think we need to be very flexible with ourselves this year on Passover, and frankly, in general, that, you know, this is not normal operating procedure, and whatever we can do to make it work is what we're going to do to make it work for us this year.
I was thinking just of a Zoom call. I mean, I was invited to one where my friend basically just started inviting so many people. She wanted to be, you know, open, and then I decided, actually, I didn't want to be a part of that. I haven't told her yet, just because I think it's going to be too chaotic for me. I think there's going to be like 10 families on this call, and it's not, you know, so I think you have to also know when to say yes, when to say no, and just, you know, figure out what you need out of a call, and if it's enough to be with one person, one family member, I mean, other family, whatever, but to figure out what you need for Passover this year. You know, everyone has to figure out what's good for them too.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we can continue to, you know, be resources for each other. I think all these links here have been really helpful. So I'm going to save this chat, and I can send out these resources to everyone. But as our closing exercise, I want everyone to share a dayenu. So dayenu means enough, and it's expression of gratitude that we say throughout the Passover Seder. So in the chat box, and then I'll have actually, forget the chat box. Whenever you think of a dayenu or share something that you're grateful for, just share, just say it out.
I will say that my kids are all healthy and happy, and that's always a dayenu for me.
Ditto.
I think more than just having a job, we have a job like this, which is so focused on community and Judaism and things that we value.
Yeah, similar to that, I have felt really grateful that this is my job always, but especially now that I get to dedicate my days to thinking about how to help people through this time. Really grateful for that.
I'm just grateful for, you know, having, this is repetitive, but just for having, you know, healthy kids, having a home and a backyard where my kids aren't going crazy. So I'm just, you know, I guess I'm grateful, even though this is a difficult time, I still feel very fortunate for what I do have. So yeah. The only thing I'm not fortunate, the only thing I want to say, dayenu, and I wish it was gone. I'm sick of constantly cleaning and cooking, and I feel like it's just all the time, and it's too much, and I need a break. So that's the negative thing that I had to get out.
I will echo what everybody said and bring some humor to it. So I am so thankful because I'm finally getting through my DVR, which was like at like 65%. Now it's at 45%. Not because I have less time to work, I'm working more, but I can just have it on in the background. And with me, it's like a checklist of things. Even if I'm not fully watching it, I can just press play and let it be done. And then I can press delete. That's the only way I can do it.
I'll say, I mean, it's quite obvious, but technology, I mean, for sure, I think all the work stuff, making it easy to do, and connecting with family. But like, I think it's also just like a connection to like some sort of normalcy. in our life. Like I work out every day because of technology, and I would not do that probably otherwise. And I feel healthy because of access to things like that. And if this happened in any other decade, probably it would be so different. And so we're lucky it's happening, I guess, now in the era of technology that we have, if it had to happen at any point.
I agree. I'm very thankful for technology. Like me and my brothers and my dad all had a Skype call the other day, and it was so it's very nice all like our time together. So, I
want to Dianu all of yours. They're all obviously. It's funny. I feel like normally when you do this, like some don't resonate. Like these all resonate. But I'll also add that I'm like taking time to catch up with people that I wouldn't normally spend time talking to. And so whether it's my friends who live far or also my friends who live near that I don't typically put effort in, like, we don't drive west side to east side here. So, and now I'm in the valley. But I think that there's something to that. And also Diana too, we finally got my grandma onto Zoom. Like we're not 100% there, but we are getting there. And it is the cutest thing. And it brings me so much joy. So I'll Diana with that as well.
This is Beth, and I'll Diana that my daughter's school, she's in 9th grade, is just fabulous, and not even a doubt that she's learning as much as she was learning when she was there in school. Not quite as sure if my son's learning so much, but I'm really thrilled with my daughter's program.
That's great.
I'll share that I am, in addition to what everyone else has shared, I think just for like the effort and the resourcefulness of like people in our work, just like people immediately like pivoting and like coming up with all these kinds of new ideas for how to do our jobs creatively and still like do our jobs well, when some of the like fundamentals of our jobs, I'll speak for myself, if my job was like in person things, and the same goes for like Passover. I was thinking about that on like the call that Leah and I were on about tips for hosting a virtual Seder. The resourcefulness, the creativity, like all of the ideas that were like coming forth and being shared with one another. I was just like so impressed and so grateful that people are putting in that effort to still make their Passover meaningful, to still make their lives and their jobs and their relationships meaningful when like nothing is normal.
All right. Anyone else who hasn't gotten a chance, just want to make sure you get an opportunity to say a Dainu if you want to.
I'm grateful to have these kinds of opportunities like we had yesterday and today to be together and to connect. I'm grateful that I relearned to ride a bike before this all started, which I didn't realize was going to be like my main outlet to the world. So I'm grateful about that, and that the kids are healthy, and that we're managing to pull off everything that needs to be pulled off. But I'm grateful for all of you and the learning we're doing together.
Great. Thank you guys so much. It was so nice to connect, and I'll share the resources that we shared with each other and a recording of this if people are interested. Thank you guys so much. Grateful for all of you, and hope everyone has a restful Shabbat and weekend. And I look forward to being creative and continuing to do the good work that we do next week.
Bye.